Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week, new theme. This week we're going to be checking out hi-fi black metal, which is pretty much the opposite of lo-fi black metal. With any luck, this week will be filled with black metal songs that have excellent or clean use of production. Very different from the overly produced lo-fi black. Overly produced, kind of a weird way to word that. It's the black metal that's just really gritty. Almost sounds like it's coming through bad speakers, lots of fuzz, just kind of using a lot of elements to hide the sound. Whereas this, we're going to be hopefully looking at black metal compositional techniques with more clear production elements. Interestingly, we checked this out on Friday to create a request with the band Bizarre Cult, which the giveaway is still going on for that. Head over there to the reaction if you'd like to get in that giveaway. And also over the weekend with Ungwa's album Exercises in Futility, which I felt had a little bit of extra oomph in the production as well. So we actually kind of had a soft roll-in into this theme. So yeah, let's get around to this. I feel like I've rambled on long enough now. Today we have Wolves in the Throne Room. The song is Thuja Magus Imperium. Let's dive in and see what's going on. I'm already loving this. Yeah, the chimes. The placement of them is so good. Yeah, the way that the left violin entered into the chord just a hair before everyone else and felt like this nice lead in to this unresolved dissonant, not dissonant, unresolved. I'm just gonna go over that chord leading into, yeah. There's something very calming about this so far as well. can really feel the bass kicks. Yeah, there's just a lot of sub bass with the bass kicks. It is like this constant force being felt. And more black metal with a triplet feel. Although in this case, I think we're going to go with 3/4 on this, rather than triplets over 4/4. Everything's really distant though. It's an interesting decision to make. Those cymbals are also, man, there's just a lot of really interesting production decisions going on here. just such a brutal vocal delivery. So fuzzy. This is that static I was missing in the album reaction over the weekends. It's very interesting that we finished off the track with the sound of white noise of water waves crashing against the beach, because I was actually going to make that exact analogy for that final minute. Um, and we're definitely going to get into that. But the first thing I want to start on, what I think my biggest question right now is the production. Okay, so the whole purpose of this week is finding black metal music. So, blast beats, double bass kicks, tremolo picking, harsh vocals, and lots of distortion. And finding music that I would say has high production value with those ideas. And I guess the high production value plus the lots of fuzz kind of are at ends with each other. I don't think we're actually going to find anything this week that I think is well, actually we might, because like I just mentioned, Bizarre Cult on Friday and Umgwa on it's supposed to be Saturday, ended up being released on Sunday. I felt like those captured the elements of black metal musically while having production that made sense to me. It was cleaner, it was richer, and there was more clarity, more presence of the instruments. This is not that, which kind of confuses me why it's here this week. But I wonder if there might have been a bit of either a confusion or maybe a misunderstanding or even maybe a misremembering, because there are elements of clean production in here, primarily if we look at the opening 2 minutes and the final 30 seconds. basically anything that has to do with the strings, the clean vocals, and acoustic guitar is very cleanly and clearly produced. The opening 2 minutes was gorgeous. I loved the way everything was set. I loved the way everything sounded. I could hear the timbre clearly of each of the instrumentations, or each of the instruments. I could hear them individually. And most importantly, I could hear them being placed throughout the sound sphere. While most of it was left and right panned or centered in the case of the vocals, there was the chimes that was very meticulously placed. Kind of center, kind of a bit to the right, and it kind of moved a little bit, right? It wasn't ever perfectly centered, it wasn't ever fully to the right, just kind of swayed in this 45-degree angle. Moving between, like 35 and 60, just kind of hovering around this midpoint between centered and right. And, this introduction kind of put me in a mindset that we were going to be in store for some really great production. And yes, we were, but not in what I was looking for. I don't want to diminish the production at all. In fact, whoever the producer is should definitely get some praise for producing both the intro to this track, which is very well done on a clear level, right? Everything's clearly placed, maximum use of sound sphere, and each instrument can be heard very clearly and cleanly. But the producer also has the chops to create something very black metal, which is what we got throughout the middle. So, like I said, I don't want to diminish what the producer in master, mixer, anybody in the sound engineering department put together when they created this mix, this final mix down, because it is phenomenal to see the range of skill that the producing team has. But the black metal portion of this is definitely something I would place middle of the road as far as production goes. It's not lo-fi black metal, that's for sure, but to me it's not very hi-fi either. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of static that covers up the core timbre of the instruments. I have a difficult time actually hearing the characteristics of these instruments being played. In fact, oftentimes I actually have a difficult time hearing the notes. It's sort of just a range, like, oh, this one's lower and that one went a lot higher, but I don't really hear notes. It's more of just perceived pitch, if that makes any sense. And that's all kind of hidden underneath the fuzz, this texture, this crackling, the static above everything. And this applies to the vocals as well. There is a ton of extra just crunch put on top of it that kind of makes it difficult to hear the voice itself. To me, it's a lot of crackling and syllables. And a lot of the times I can't even make out the syllables. I don't know. I don't want to attribute that to the vocal delivery or the production, though, because with a lot of harsh vocals, I just don't have the ear for them yet, especially for the black metal type. So it could just be that I don't, I don't have an ear for that style of delivery, and it has nothing to do with the production. But it is, to me, mostly just this extra texture, this extra crackle that fits in with everything else, especially since it's pushed way down into the mix, lower than usual. Even with black metal, typically the vocals do not sit above the music like they would in pop or anything radio, but here, rather than being pushed into the mix where I think they usually get put when I've listened to black metal in the past, to me it feels actually a little bit under. I'd say even the guitars are above the vocals in the mix. They feel like they're buried under everything. And then when we look at the drums and the bass, it kind of removes a lot of the width and reverb from both of these instruments, and we end up just getting this sort of thumpy punch, sort of just the initial hit without any of the trailing aspect of it. It's a very, very dry sound on both of these instruments, and that dryness ends up getting it to feel a bit muddy and distant. And distant is actually a thing that I've picked up a lot on this track. And I think I even mentioned that everything feels very far away somewhere in the middle of the song, in the middle of the reaction. I bumped up my volume 2 or 3 times, which is usually, I mean, that's a bit abnormal for me. One, I try to take care of my ears. I try not to make the volume too high, but usually it's just one volume adjustment, and it's usually not a lot. And here I had to bump my volume up multiple times to make it even feel like I could get a clear portrait of what I was listening to. A lot of it seemed just very blurry and distant. It's very hard to make out without having a lot of volume behind it. And once I got it up to a decent level, it still felt distant though. And a lot of the fuzziness and dryness in the lower end just makes it really difficult to the hear what's going on, honestly. I think if we removed the strings in a lot of these sections, well, first of all, it would sound very different because the strings do a huge job in filling up the sound sphere. I think the raw metal aspect, the bass, the guitars, the vocals, the drums, that's actually very narrow, which fits in with traditional black metal that we've heard in the past. They kind of do go for this centered, narrow kind of sound. It's not about the width or filling up a sound sphere. So these guys kind of do that by bringing in classical instruments. We got the violins, we got some chimes, there's an acoustic guitar in there, and they're there to fill the sound up. But also, I think it's interesting too that, for me at least, they're here to make the pitches more hearable, to put more spotlight on the pitches themselves, because the violins are not beholden to the fuzz. That's a weird sentence. The violins, though, they don't have any of the static over top of them. They're cleanly produced, they're cleanly played, there's no distortion on them, and they're allowed to exist like that. Interestingly as well, they're placed on the edges of the auditory periphery. They're not front and center. And since they're playing, in a lot of these sections, the same thing that the guitars are playing, you get this overlap where you get the tone, the raw timbre and pitch out of the violin, but you get the gritty, edgy, crackling static from the electric guitar. And I think that helps improve the listenability a lot. It helps the pitches of each of these, of what the guitar is doing, stand out against the fuzz, but it's actually not the guitar doing it. And it's an interesting thing in my mind, at least, because I hear this divide. And I think a lot of it has to do with the production, because the cleanly produced instruments it's almost like an overlaying effect. Where, think about cell animation, right? Not where I thought I was going today. Animators will draw a background on a piece of paper or a cell, to be more specific, and then they'll draw the character that's moving in front of this background on a completely different sheet, and it's all transparent. And when you put it down, it looks like it's all one picture. And then they can take the picture and go to the next cell, which has a slightly different animation to it, so that when they're put together, it creates a moving picture. But this way, they don't have to redraw the background over and over and over and over. You just have to animate or draw what's being animated. And this is why in older cartoons, there would always be the one rock that looks different than the rest of the rocks, and that just happens to be the one that the person picks up, or stuff like that. The one cupboard door that's differently shaded or colored than the rest. And this is why, because that would be on the top cell. There's actually a difference between it. There's a divide. And that's kind of what I hear here. They kind of come together into something that feels homogeneous. It does feel like a song that comes together. We have the textures, we have the sounds, we have the rhythm, and the music that stems from that. But also the violin just feels very distinct from the guitar. And where I think they're supposed to come together and kind of bleed into this singular, unique sound that is both fuzzy yet clear, I don't exactly hear that all the time. It's sort of like, those illusions where you have to cross your eyes and eventually you'll see the picture that's like indented or popping out or whatever. But if you just move your eyes a little bit, it goes back to just looking like a flat picture. You don't see the hidden picture. That's what I kind of get here, where if I'm not really paying attention to it, it kind of blends together. But the moment that I'm like, oh, what's going on with the guitar? What's this melody doing? Boom, they separate, right? They're two very different ideas there. And so maybe casually, if I listen to this, I might get a little bit more enjoyment out of it if I'm not really paying too much attention to the individual aspects. But the moment that I actually put my ear on it, it splits up and it's very distracting for me because it's this sharp reminder that half of this song is cleanly produced and the other half is purposefully obscured. And I get it, that's black metal, right? The whole point is to have all this fuzz and distortion on top of it. That's kind of what I get out of general black metal production. And maybe it's going to be difficult to get away from that because it is a sound that is so closely tied to the genre. But it is interesting to me that this song kind of exists in two worlds, one of clean production and one of gritty production. And it was really difficult to listen to because I, about the halfway point, became aware of this divide. Um, but interestingly, it kind of comes together at the end, I think, to show the true form of the song, which was wall of sound, super narrow, very muddied and staticky, all kind of coming together into this singular auditory concept, which was the final minute or so, minute and a half before we had our outro with the acoustic guitar, I think it was, and the waves. And so we have the stuff that we've had previously. We have the metal section, we have the acoustic guitar, we have the violin. Everybody's, growling and playing guitar and hitting the drums and stuff. I'm real good at describing music. Um, but on the sides, like the furthest periphery, where the violins have traditionally sat to provide the melodic embellishment to what the guitars have been doing, there is pure raw static, almost like someone turned on an old timey TV to the left and right. I mean, two TVs, and just turned them on to a channel with no signal and just let the static go. And it begins to overpower everything, and it's slowly washing over it. And this idea of washing over is what made me begin to think of waves and why I thought the ending was oddly appropriate. And then eventually the static comes in, washes everything over, kind of fades out, does this weird looping idea of like coming over all the music and then kind of bringing it out. They kind of fade out into the waves and the acoustic guitar. But in that moment, where we have all the music and the static is sort of on the outsides of it, closing in around it, it becomes more and more difficult to hear what any of the instruments are doing. And I think that is what ultimately this music is without the violins. So, production wise, what I walk away from with this song is not necessarily a high fidelity production for black metal. It's sort of kind of walking the middle of the road. I do feel it leans a little closer to lo-fi as far as the core metal instrumentation goes, but that it does get lifted up a little bit because of what they're doing with the violins. And I think it's weird to separate them. Like, it is the song. What is the production of the song? It's very strange for me to view this in two productions, and I kind of don't want to separate them because the song is not just the metal aspect, it's not just the violins, but I do hear this song as two separate concepts. So I suppose in a sense this is higher fidelity black metal because while it does capture the static and crackling components that black metal is known for, it also has very clear melodic writing from clear melodic instruments. And I could see how people would say, this is hi-fi black metal. Let's suggest it to them. Let's see where this goes. But at the end of the day, I hear this primarily as lo-fi with a boost rather than hi-fi. So, but again, that's just me. Like as usual, hit me up in the comments. Let me know how you hear any of this, how the production sounds to you. I am more than open to conversation about this. I don't want to ever say that I am some sort of authority in music or production. I am just a dude on the internet giving you my opinion about something I've heard for the first time. With the production out of the way, though, let's get into some of the musical ideas. And I don't really know that there's too much music I can get into. As I stated, there is a lot of this song that I can't quite hear past the noise. It is sort of just a fuzzy song to me. There's definitely thematic elements that I kind of apply to all black metal. The fuzziness reminds me of snow for some reason, just black on white, stark environment. Snow on a mountain is immediately where my mind goes to when I hear production like this. There is something very bleak and aggressive about the overall themes of the music that I perceive. And I'm very open to admitting that is probably on me. Like maybe, because, okay, let me start over. I bring a lot of biases into listening to stuff that sounds like this. Like I said, the sounds themselves feel bleak to me. It's very black against white, high contrast, staticky sounding. But part of that is probably also that I don't know how to listen to this. There might be beauty in the style of music that I don't quite have an ear for. And once I kind of train my ear to be better about hearing this style of production, I might be able to hear some more of the nuance to it. This is a problem I've had with a few genres in the past, and notably, post metal, I have gotten better at hearing. If you go back and check out my Russian Circles 309 reaction that I did at the beginning of the channel, and the one that I did earlier this year, I think, I revisited the same song. Drastically different analysis of the track. My ear grew and I was able to hear more of the nuance and expressiveness in the style. And I think that's something that's going to happen eventually with black metal, even though I've been listening to black metal for 2 years now, I think, since the first time you guys threw it at me, and I still haven't quite got an ear for it, but eventually I'm hoping it'll happen. But what all this leads to, though, is me not really being able to hear the nuance or the expressiveness in black metal. It all kind of sounds the same to me. So when it comes to the music, at best I can speak about the melodic writing or the chord progression in the violins, because that's about the only musical tone-based thing I can hear. And honestly, while there is a lot of beauty in it, especially when we look at the first minute and a half or whatever the intro was, it shows that these guys have the capacity to write extremely moving, emotive music. Not just strong chord composition, but also melody that, takes that core chord progression and brings it up, right? And really pulls out specific emotions that they want out of it to have these really strong melodic moments. The opening was beautiful, it was moving, it was gorgeous. I loved every bit of it. The chimes were a nice touch. They had that nice, environmental, atmospheric kind of thing going on around the music itself. The whole thing was just expertly created in every facet of it. But then when we get to the black metal portion, all of that sort of gets pulled away. There's not much of a chord progression. As far as I can hear from the notes that I picked up, mostly from the violin, it sort of just bounces back and forth between two chords. Those two chords change depending on the section of the song, but we really don't see any four chord progressions throughout this, sort of just vamping back and forth between two. Um, and at least for me, it's always sort of a bit of tension and dissonance. We have a resting mode, which is a fairly balanced chord, and then we have an unstable chord with a little bit of dissonance in it, so that we can resolve back down and then introduce tension, and then resolve down and then introduce tension. And that seems to be what they end up doing for a lot of this track, and it works. A lot of songs just simply bounce between the ideas of stability and instability. Like this is not new. This is not just something they do. And I don't want anybody to think I'm talking down about it, because it is very effective for a lot of music. But we do move from more expressive chord progressions down to the simpler back and forth idea. And the melodic elements do the same thing. We do hear some nice melody lines between the guitar and the violin, but they don't really decide to lean into any sort of, at least from what I can hear, emotive element. They sort of exist to push the song forward. A lot of this song is, in fact, rhythmically oriented, which not not really out of black metal's wheelhouse, but there is something interesting I want to talk about here, and that is the concept of 3 or 6, however you want to view it. I had mentioned at the beginning of the song that it was a black metal song with a triplet feel, and I think I'm wrong about that. Well, right, but wrong. Instead of 4/4 using triplets, by the middle point of the song, I really figured out that we were probably in 3/4, or possibly 6/8. And all of this, as I've mentioned before, doesn't really matter when you perform it. For people who are new to the channel, time signature is a way for the composer to let the musician know what the intended pulse of the song is. So triplets in 4/4 versus quarter notes in 3/4 at the right tempo sound identical. The same thing goes with the triplet feel in 4/4 versus 6/8 at the right tempo, sounds identical. The rhythmic components are the same between them. So in here we have sort of a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 feel. That's like the majority of the song right there. And how you could feel that in 4 would be triplets. Triplet, 2 pullet, 3 pullet, 4 pullet, 1 pullet, and that kind of idea. So you get your 1 2 3 4 for your 4/4, but you have the triplets in the middle of them. But it is a very slow 4/4. But interestingly, within this 3/4, we also have this constant eighth note attack. So we have quarter notes versus eighth notes throughout a vast majority of the song, with the eighth notes primarily coming from the drums. They're really driving the energy and momentum and direction in this track. So if our guitars are emphasizing the 1 2 3 1 2 3, then the drums are going to be playing twice as fast. So we get 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. And they're not really emphasizing anything other than the 1. The downbeat of the bar gets some emphasis, but nothing else, which is very waltzy, but it doesn't feel like a waltz here. With the waltz, we typically emphasize the 1, usually with a little bit of an extra oomph, especially from a bass instrument. Tubas and bass guitars are excellent at giving something this waltzy feel, and it doesn't really feel that way here, and I'm not quite sure why. Some of it I think might be just due to the rigidity of it. The waltz is a very flowing dance, and it gives the 3/4 a sort of a waviness to it. It's kind of how I feel 3/4 most often, where you get the 1 2 3 4 5. Well, that's technically 6/4, but whatever. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, where you have this weight and then this levity, and then the weight and then the levity, while the 2 and the 3 kind of wait to return back down to earth for the 1. And here we don't really get that. It's just very rigid, very constant. And even though we have this accented 1, it doesn't really feel like 2 and 3 have any levity to it. It's sort of just waiting for the next one to happen without providing any of that lightness, without that yeah, lightness. We're gonna stick with that. And so what we end up hearing though is this very rigid driving momentum. It never really ceases. The drums are constantly going forward with these eighth notes, always going. The guitar, even well, yeah, the guitar we get the pulse of the downbeats of each beat in the bar, but there's also another guitar that's doing tremolo picking on the eighth notes, maybe even the 16th notes. Couldn't quite hear it. As usual with black metal, I find it very difficult to hear the attacks against the static, and it sort of just makes everything feel like long drawn out notes. So if he was going to do tremolo picking over an entire bar, it would just feel like, well, in this case, a dotted whole note or a dotted half note because we're looking at three beats. But yeah, just these elongated held out notes because I don't hear the individual hits on all of them. I usually only hear when the note changes. Again, though, that's just my ear. I know on the Bizarre Cult video, I think it was, I saw some comments where people said that they heard every individual attack, and that is just, it just kind of blows my mind. But at the same time, like I said, I'll get there, right? My ear will eventually get to a point where I can hear black metal more clearly, more cleanly once I can find a way to push past the static. There was one moment in the track, though, where we sort of, I think we went to halftime, but we had a tempo drop. I'm pretty sure we still stuck with the 3/4 vibe, but we went to halftime and there was still drive there, but just not as much. We still had this idea of quarter notes versus eighth notes between the guitar and the drums. Just our tempo had been cut down. Any of our energy or momentum was diminished. But it wasn't long before we jumped back up into the original tempo, and then we finished the song out with that huge burst of energy with the static coming in around the outsides and washing over the music before hearing the waves. So, I think for the most part that covers all of my thoughts about the music itself. Dive into the lyrics here and see how they treat us. I'm actually going to be a little interested in how much I get out of this. All right. Redness in the east beyond the mountain, the wheel turns anew, turning ever towards the sun, garlands adorn a chariot aflame. Blood runs from the flank of a wounded stag, turning inwards all beings bow low. Concealed she flies, then hidden by snow, eyes pale, voice of night. So the sun is rising. The wheel turns anew, turning ever towards the sun. I don't know what specifically we're talking about there. Garlands adorn a chariot aflame. This reminds me of, I don't know the mythology, but basically the sun was carried by a chariot. The god of the sun or whatever actually pulled the sun, into the day, so to speak. Blood runs from the flank of a wounded stag, so somebody's been out hunting. Turning inwards, all beings bow low, and unconcealed she flies, then hidden by snow, eyes pale, voice of night. So I guess that's to say that that everybody bows down to this god, thanks them for bringing the sun, and when night comes, she, interestingly, I don't remember the god's son being portrayed as female, but again, I'm not really sure what mythology this is, so I could actually be looking at the wrong mythology, and I could also be misremembering. So that's very possible as well. Moving forward, the black clouds bring rain. So still focusing on weather and basically things above, right? Clouds, sky, sun. A white cloak and mantle enshrouds all of the great monoliths. I mean, we already, would this be the snow? It says that snow was brought up in the first stanza, but I'm not sure what it was alluding to. This white cloak that enshrouds all the great monoliths, which could be seen as the great mountains, or as well as the largest buildings that they have. What would enshroud all of them? That's white, snow. Deities of frost crave an offering to storms, great firs felled by the wind. So yeah, we're still looking at a lot of weather, right? We're talking about rain and snow, sun coming up, and here we're talking about great winds that tear up forests. The deities of frost, so ice gods, crave an offering to storms. The eagles, airy, towering windswept, sky lords towering above. Nightborn songs descend by moonlight, a rain of jewels. Calliope sings, each one a secret word inscribed in time. Oh, Calliope. That name sounds familiar, and once again, can't quite place it. I can't remember if that's Greek or Roman. Sacred bones crumble enshrined, entombed in roots and stone. A dead sun burns in the hollow earth, nameless rivers of dust. This bright thread so pure, drawn through everything that is, enslaved by ancient bonds, beyond the mists and golden light, beyond the darkness, transcends time. Yeah, so I kind of got nothing on this. There's obviously some element of mythology from some civilization. Can't quite place it, and basically it seems like an accounting of natural disasters through the eyes of the gods. But I'm really not sure how any of this. Well, I don't have a firm grasp on the lyrics themselves, but what little I'm picking up, I'm not really seeing how it applies to any of the musicality in here. Any of the musical themes, any of the musical themes that we've picked up on. Interestingly, I don't remember the opening lyrics with the clean vocals being in English, and I'm wondering what they were, what they translate to, and why they're not here. Or maybe it was just random syllables. That's something I suppose that can be true. Yeah, so I've got nothing here. You guys hit me up. Let me know if you got anything out of these lyrics, if there's anything that I certainly missed, and we'll see if we can't apply that to some of the musical themes here. Well, although the driving intensity, I mean, they do talk about forests being overrun by wind, great monoliths being enshrouded by snow, and there's definitely some elements of the earth. Yeah, I don't know. That's the best I got. That's the best thing. We have driving force in the music that kind of ties into these natural disasters, but I'm not sure what the lull is in the middle before we get washed over in the end. Unless, I mean, nope. Maybe there was a flood or a tsunami that happened that washed something away in Greek or Roman history, but I mean, that's really the best I've gotten. I think that's a pretty weak analysis for the lyrics. So yeah, like I said, hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you got anything to add to this, anything that you want to talk about that I spoke about earlier, especially production, and maybe even ear training. Like, did anybody else have a problem getting into black metal and something clicked and they know what that something was? Because I'll definitely take some guidance here. Obviously, whatever techniques I typically utilize to help learn how a genre sounds and to get past certain listenability barriers are not working here, because I made the revelation. I think Black Metal Week was week 36, 35. It was in the 30s, mid 30s, I'm pretty sure. And we're in week 118 now, I think. So, oh, it hasn't been 2 years. I think it's been about a year and a half. We're fast approaching 2 years since I've heard my first black metal song, and unlike other genres that eventually I've picked up on and been able to listen to, I think black metal might even be the one that we have on the channel the most. We have Black Metal Week, Lo-Fi Black Metal Week, Black Metal Origins, and now Hi-Fi Black Metal. I don't think any other genre has more than 2 weeks devoted to it, and I'm just not getting it. So yeah, any help in that would also be appreciated. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here. It has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, help support the channel, and get to vote on future themes and songs. You can follow me on Twitter, join the Discord community, submit special selections, just a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, we have a special selection today. Really interesting. It's some a cappella work where they had an audio engineer work some magic to make it sound like the performance was being performed in the Hagia Sophia, which is one of the most renowned buildings for a lot of reasons. But one is that it just has phenomenal acoustics. So that's definitely a video that I suggest checking out. I'm excited to dig into that song and figure out, what exactly they were doing, how they emulated this Hagia Sophia acoustics, and just what they decided to play with this acoustic temperament to it. But if that doesn't interest you, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual, and we'll continue on with our journey through hi-fi black metal. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.